Elves are a noble, honourable, hard-working people, which is precisely why we're going to push them on the floor and rob them. You see, our man Grimgor has developed a bit of a taste for capitalism, and he wants to become a millionaire. And as we all know, the only way to do that is off the back of somebody else's hard work. So we'll be leaving Grimgor's home of Gash-Kadrak to venture across the world in search of any elves that we can rob. And we won't stop until Grimgor becomes a millionaire. So, very hard, max stat boost for the enemy. We begin with ogres all up in our kingdom. Now, I've played the start of this campaign enough to know that I can just auto-resolve my way through it. You just recruit a couple of spearmen every turn, they die in the auto-resolve, but eventually you get to Karak Vrag, and you're done. Province 1 acquired. Now, for the most part, this is going to be the only province we own, so I'm going to take a bit of time to level it up and build up a strong army, because it's going to be a good old while before Grimgor comes home. And we're getting to tier 3 so we can unlock the big fort building, so we can get some Black Orcs and a bunch of buffs for them. So we're going to have a pretty beefy army of mostly Black Orcs with some Cav as well. Nothing too crazy here, pretty simple. We also get a Black Orc big boss hero for the army called Urk, but his name needs a little more given the task at hand, so he will become Urk Elfbonker. I'm also going to get a River Troll Hag for the magic, a Dynasty Cracktooth, but she will become Dynasty Elfcracker. I also started with the Goblin Big Boss, who is going to be our agent on the campaign map. Scram de Ruffy will become Scram de Knifefear Stabber. With our chunky force completed, leaving one space for Rudlug's Armoured Orcs when I can get them, we head south towards our first target, going from Gash-Kadrak to the Plain of Bones, going after Imric, of course, the nearest elves that I could think of. And with a little bit of preliminary scouting, we find they've got an army or two around, but over the turns they start moving their armies west and get completely wiped out by the rats. A few turns on and we arrive to, well, not a lot. They're rebuilding an army over here, but their main city, the Fortress of Vorag, is ours for the taking. So we declare our war and get after it, making our first little bit of money, 12 grand off this sack, plus any money from the battle itself, and already we're up to 22 grand. We came in with about 8, so making progress. Now, over the turn, I've got my War available, and I'm going to go for it on the Fortress of Vorag, even though it's basically ours already, but I'm not sure how many armies they might come after me with. I think they've probably got 2 or 3, so we're going to take this for now, build our War so we can stay a little bit safe. Over the next turns, I do find Imric's army, but he seems to be heading towards Helmengorst, Nurgle sort of region, and seems more intent on pushing out and taking those territories rather than defending what he already has for some reason. Standard Elf IQ, I guess, but that's another 10 Gs in the bank for us. Over the turn, Astrogoth declared war on us, so I built up a little army back home just in case anything came for our one province. Now, a big part of this robbing game plan was to also raid the crap out of them at every opportunity. Because we weren't raising the settlements, we could just carry on raiding them right afterwards, and as we travelled around. As I moved on to the next settlement, these dummy elves still had no interest in trying to defend any of their stuff. So we hit Bone Gulch with a bada bing, we hit Bitter Bay with a bada bong, and I don't know what the fuck that means, but by the time we were done with this place, we were leaving with 55 grand in the bank, which means we made about 47 grand off these smelly elves. On to the next ones. From here, I headed to the next location where I believed elves to be, which was not far to the south in the eastern colonies. So before we declared any war, we came ashore, had a little replenish and a little raid. A few turns on, we hit the Tower of the Stars for a measly 7 grand. Imric eventually came and reclaimed Fortress of Vorag, so that was gone, and so we did fail our war, but meh. As I headed on to the next island with the next settlement, those crafty little elf folk came at me from 2 directions, so I had to make a choice to engage one of them to wipe them out, because I'm not like your mum, I'm not looking to get double teamed. So the boys charged in on this lovely sunny seaside day, ready to bonk some elves on the head. Grimgor's especially ready for some decapitations. Now, our army is very simple in the works. We're just going to charge forward, create as much of a front line as we can, and then just bring in some absolute smasheroonies with boars from the back and sides, crush all the missiles, hammer and anvil the front line. Grimgor gets after the silly wizard lady in her stupid hat. Eventually she legs it and tries to escape. That's a bold strategy. Let's see how it works out for her. She might be headed for disaster. She's gone head over heels. Oh no, she just could not keep her head on straight. All right, that's enough stupid puns. Let's head off. With that army out the way, we were now free to go straight for Tor Elisor, which put an incredible 4.5 grand in the bank. Jesus Christ. I then rolled up to the capital settlement, the Tower of the Sun. Hopefully this would bring us some monies. We were stood next to the settlement outside, and they came out to get us with the help of the garrison, so I figured this is 2 birds with 1 stone. Let's get them. We had the uphill advantage, and once again, it was just a case of hitting them hard from the front, bringing all the boys in. We got our sturdy frontline Black Orcs with their shields, and then we just needed to make sure that the missile units couldn't do anything, disrupting them, mowing them down, topping it all off with a tasty bit of hammer and anvil. With that, their armies are out the way and we're free to now attack the Tower of the Sun for an easy, decisive victory, and that's going to put 13 grand in the bank, which is a little more tasty, taking us over 100 grand. So that puts us about 10% of the way to our goal of $1 million. We're now going to use this sea lane to get to the next bunch of elves we want to rob over in China. So we made about 50 grand from the eastern colonies, but now we arrive in the much more profitable, hopefully, lands of Cathay. I start heading north in search of none other than Lockyer Fellheart and his smelly dark elves, of course, but I instead find some wood elves that have taken over Shi Wu. Now I think to myself, alright, they'll do. A dead elf is a dead elf after all. I was just going to go for them, but then Lockyer appeared with one of his armies, and then over the turn they took Shi Wu, and now there's 2 stacks sat right there, so I just trundle on by, not at war yet, so I can get away with it. And I figure, well, this may be a good opportunity. If 2 of their armies are behind me, I can just run up north and sack everything along the way, and their armies will just be giving chase, but unable to catch me. So that's what the hell we did. We declared war, went after Li Zhu, sacked that for 8 grand, not terrible, better than a kick in the googlies. I then boogied on up to Fu Chao, but there was only 6 grand to be made here. Northward again, we hit Bai Chai, that's another 7 grand. And then we roll up onto Jizhu, where I got a big fight, but I don't need to fight it, but I kind of got an itch to kill some elves, so in we go. At this point, I'm pretty sure you know how this battle went. One big long line of orcs this time though. Absolute piggy destruction. The Dark Elf missiles, very dangerous with their armor-piercing missiles, so gotta get rid of them quickly. And then Grimgor, just like a night out in Wales, is knocking scantily clad women around until she gets punted away by a pig. Which is still very Welsh. Although if they were Welsh, they'd probably rather they were riding sheep so they could fight. Anyway, with that, we make a nice 4 grand off the battle and nearly 10 grand off the sack. I should mention as well that I've been taking every item and skill point I can that buffs up raiding income or sacking income just to maximize profits. Next, pretty much free for the taking, is Lockyer's starting settlement of Hai Chai. Now I'm hoping that this settlement will be a little bit more developed than the others, so will be worth a little bit more money, because that is the trouble early game, is nothing is really developed, and 35 grand, that'll do pretty nice. Now we're of course going to sack it for that, but we are going to occupy afterwards as well, just so that I can recruit a regiment of renowned Redlugs armored orcs and get that missile unit I've been waiting for. We then get an absolutely wonderful notification that some elves, the Knights of Calador, have been wiped from existence. This is wonderful news. Oh, it gets me every time. Ooh. Over the turns, a couple of factions threaten me with war unless I pay them, but because I'm trying to build my money, I don't really want to give it out, especially 20 grand to village, so I'm just going to have to take those wars and defend as best I can if they come after my province. Now, I was thinking about leaving this area at this point, but there was a couple more easy settlements to sack, so I just went for them, 8 grand from one, and then Wage In, which I thought might be worth a nice bit of change, but not really, only 4 grand from that one. And with that, I decided that's enough China for me. We're nearly a quarter of the way to our goal, sitting at 200k. Let's head out and find some more elves to rob. Back home though, those wars were coming as a Chaos Dwarf army was approaching. I rushed my army up to Gorja Rock to try and help the garrison there. That had a 15 garrison. Karak Varg had 16 garrison and was a walled settlement, so I thought we should be okay. And over the turn, they did come after us. They went for the minor settlement with our boy Icky defending, but they attacked him out in the open field, so it was a land battle. They fed us their bull pretty early. We tried to stop that getting away and to get that dead before their main army arrived. They did have some tough Chaos Dwarf units, but a lot of it was the Orc laborers, so not super dangerous. We did have our reinforcements coming as well. Not much to do here, but get into them and try to grind them down as much as possible. Try to chase down those missiles. We did a pretty good job of taking on their army. With our main army, though, we got a lot of hammer and anvil against those Orc laborers, broke their leadership pretty well. And eventually the reinforcements arrived, pulling some units away from the main fight, which helped the main army survive better. So we wore them down, chased them off, and our home province was safe for now. Just after I left, one of Lockyer's armies came and took back Hai Chai, and on my way back towards the sea lane, I happened to run into one of Lockyer's armies, so I decided to go and stand all up in its face like a proper bully and said, "Get out of my way, nerd," which they swiftly did over the next turn, clearly terrified. But I did like any good bully and just attacked them anyway. I did fight this battle, but it was on a disgustingly dark Black Ark map and I could barely see a goddamn thing, so I'll spare you the ugly side of it and just say it was actually quite a tough battle. They had a lot of shades that I was struggling to get a hold of, but we got them in the end. At the expense of one of our precious Black Orc units though. Scheisse. Back home we had more Chaos Dwarfs coming our way, so I had to try my best to defend against them. Luckily this first army was mostly just Orc slaves, and another one of their armies was mostly Goblins, so not too dangerous either, but I did have to fight this battle. It was a bit of an awkward one on a hill, coming from different directions. For some reason, some of their army was coming from in front of me, some of it was coming from down the hill over here. My reinforcements were coming from the very bottom of the hill, so I had to make do with my smaller starting army, taking them on where I could. Eventually, after about 3 hours, our reinforcements made it to the top of the hill, and we finally and slowly ground them down, eventually getting that victory. And seemingly, our home province was safe for now. For Grimgor, he was about now heading into the sea lane to go all the way across the other side of the world, where we landed in Lustria. But that was not our target destination. We were heading a little bit north of that to find the STD-ridden Cult of Pleasure, but they were nowhere to be seen. It was just some old lady, some lizard men, and some skeleton boys. I kept moving north and found some stinking high elves, but then I found some dark elves as well. It was Malekith, though. And of course, those annoying fucking high elves came and took the settlement I was going to take right before I took it, so I had to rush ahead to try and beat them. I got to the next settlement before they did, so I declared my war on Malekith and started to get to work on robbing him blind. And to be honest, I was expecting there to be good money over here at this point, but 2.5 grand here, nothing. On to the next settlement, 8 grand, better. And then on to the next one, I made 4 grand from the battle itself, but only 3 grand from the sack, which is exactly where I wanted to punch Malekith for his poor economy. I figured by turn 90 they would have some good stuff going, so I figured I needed to hit these big cities, Hagreef and Nagarond. That's surely where the money is. To make sure I got there, it was wartime again, and Nagarond was the target. I hit another place on the way up there. That was another 10 grand. So money was still coming in, but it was slower than I'd hoped. Back home, Chaos Dwarfs were still a pain in the dick and balls as they were attacking us again, but luckily our garrison could handle it. And after a little bit of replenishing and building the war, we hit Hagreef, and we managed to get a tasty 55 grand from that. That's more like it. We then pushed on to Nagarond, but that did have a big garrison and a big army stationed there as well. I did put some holes in the wall with my hero, but I wanted to try and build a couple of towers or something just to help us out. But it wasn't necessary, as over the turn they came out to get us. We could have taken a Pyrrhic victory, but we would have lost too much, so in we go. It was a choke point battle, so that made it nice and awkward. I tried to get my boys over the crossing before the enemy got there. I was trying to properly form up, but they came at me before I could do that, so I just had to go after them. Again, this was a very messy battle. They had a lot of missiles I had to try and chase down. I really needed more cavalry, I was finding. Eventually, though, we managed to smash them into elf paste, and that was done, and Nagarond was basically ours. And on the next turn, we attacked it, took it down, and got a nice 66 grand for our trouble. And we occupied it as well, not only to just replenish ourselves, but to build a second army, because one army just wasn't enough. So Asgog Elfburner joins the gang. An army did try their luck right here, but I decided just to Pyrrhic victory them away for now. But hey, that fight made us 11 grand, so can't complain. We now sat just shy of about 400k, so we were well on our way to our goal. I was getting more cavalry in my army, as I said, needed more for all the missiles, but I didn't get to hang around too long as there seemed to be a lot of Dark Elf armies coming our way, and I didn't want to get worn down fighting here. So I packed up my stuff, cancelled my recruitment, and started to head out east to get away from Nagarond and head towards our next target location. And of course, it wasn't long before they came a-knocking, and I thought they were going to take Nagarond back, but they just sacked it the once, twice, thrice. For some reason over the turns they just kept sacking it but never took it. I meanwhile had just been continuing to head east, trying to avoid their armies as much as possible. I did come across some nice settlements to sack, made 32 grand from one of them, and this just happened to be a very profitable shortcut across these Dark Elf lands. And eventually it came to the point where my war was one turn from ending, and all these Dark Elf armies were still just sat outside. They could have taken it and ruined my war for me, but they very kindly didn't. Over the next turn they didn't attack me, and I got my war completed and got a nice elf head trophy. Lovely. And they still continued on. They sacked it once again. That's, what's after thrice? Quartice? Eventually, thank God, there was a rebellion and some greenskins came and took it. And well, you know what they say, never send an elf to do a greenskins job, or any kind of job, because they're mostly useless. So from here we leave Nagarond with about 400k and head towards the ultimate money prize. It is, of course, the Ulthuan Donut. So we come ashore there, start doing a bit of raiding and replenishing before we make any moves. I start moving inland, looking for a good place to start. I want to hit a big money place first. That's when I find old Tor Anrock over here, which has a gold mine. And with 3 grand of income, it's safe to say it's a gold mine. That must be mine, so let's waste no time. I declare my war on Etain, which of course means I'm declaring war on the entire donut. And this is no doubt an easy victory, bringing us 4,000 from the fight and 56k from the sack. So that's about 60k in the bank, bringing us nearly up to 500,000. I then go to attack the next settlement along, thinking I'd be at war with them, but I'm not. So I'm going to keep that peace for now. Still a bit of elven civil war going on. I like it. More elf-on-elf action means double the dead elves after all. Now, I had Scrammed and I Fear Stabber scout ahead where we found a bunch of Etain armies, but they weren't really defending any of these settlements to the south of me, so I'm going to take all them nice and quick, but we are going to call up the War because I'm expecting to face those 3 armies soon, so we're going to need all the boys. And naturally, Lothan is going to be the target of my war, so I sacked my way down this southwest side of the island, eventually arriving at Vor's Anvil, which we managed to sack for a very tasty 63 grand, and eventually decided to take it as a little base of operations for the undoubtedly incoming armies. And oh hey, what do you know, there's 4 armies coming our way, so I prepare accordingly, recruiting some of my war units and getting the Biggin Regiment of Renown to help out, and I'm gonna try my luck with an ambush as well, so we'll see how that plays out. Yeah, that didn't work, but it's only Etain bringing their 3 stacks versus my basically 3 stacks. So we're going to have a rumble. Now, this happened to be a choke point battle, which worked out quite nicely for the Biggin, who could throw his rocks and smash into some piles of elves. He was actually doing some pretty good damage to some of the stronger units. Lots of dead elves. Well done, Biggin. So, of course, this being a choke point battle, there wasn't too much to do other than to grind them down. I didn't want to sit too much in the choke point because they had the missile advantage, so I needed to try and get behind them. So, being a little bit further back allowed me to get my chariots and some things through so I could mess up their dangerous missiles like the Sisters of Avalon. So, this was really just going to be a battle of attrition, as we had a similar amount of troops, both having some stronger troops and some weaker troops. I was dropping my magic. I had a purple sun on some Sisters of Avalon here. I managed to get my feral wyverns round to get after their artillery as well. But of course, you can only have 40 units on each side at a time, so the rest of the reinforcements trickled in from that other stack. I still had some crappy gobbos, but a lot of my boar cavalry to come in, and they were really what I needed to stop all their missiles, as those could do a lot of damage, so I had to make sure I controlled them. I had to have the Biggin rogue idol soak up a lot of that missile fire, which did cost him his little rocky life. And eventually, even though the favor bar was mostly in their favor for the entire battle, suddenly it just went, as did all of their troops. And we'd done it. We'd beaten back this filthy elf assault. We lost a few units in the process, but they lost a lot more. I finish off what's left of the beaten up armies around. Although there is still one full Ivres stack to deal with, that's going to run away for now. But of course it's going to come back with a friend, so we got to deal with these as well. I'm going to go for an auto-resolve on this though, as we're not going to lose any units. I then find myself in your mum's favourite situation once again, with dudes trying to hit me from the front, dudes trying to hit me from the back. I gotta get out of here. So I plow on forwards towards the Ivres armies and can get a close victory auto-resolve, but a lightning strike could be better here. I've got a whole load of anti-large cavalry to answer their cavalry, so let's go. I'm putting all my orcs in the middle, and then my cavalry is out wide on the left and out wide on the right, because that's exactly what the enemy's done as well. So we can meet them in the same formation, and we'll have the advantage because we've got that anti-large boar cav. So the execution of this one is pretty simple. Once we win on those flanks, we should be able to flank around and envelop whatever's left in that center, which is pretty much how this one goes down. Those silver helms not able to stand up to the big boys. And of course, wherever there's a stupid elf in a ridiculous hat trying to cast some wimpy magic, Grimgor's there to twat him in the face. Insert comedy pig knockdown. And insert comedy decapitation of elf. She must be feeling pretty lightheaded. I can't do it again. With that, we've taken out one of the Ivres armies. Vor's Anvil took a sack in, but our military prowess had scared all the other armies away, leaving Lothan ours for the potential taking. There was a stack there, and I was really going to need some towers, and I thought there's no way I can sit here and besiege this. Those Catholic armies are going to attack me, so I've got to fall back for now and do something else. So I take to the ocean once again. This time, I'm heading over to try and get Gain Vale, Avalon's main settlement, and I arrive there to find they do have a full stack defending it, but hey, we've got pretty much 4 stacks. Let's get them. I used my hero boy to put some holes in the wall to help us out as well. I did intend to build some towers and besiege this, but with 2 Catholic armies right up my ass, I just decided to do the auto-resolve and get it out the way because I can then use the settlement to defend myself. We got a tasty 15 grand from the fight and 74 from the sack, so about 90 grand from that place alone. That puts us at nearly 700k. Oh, scheisse. So we're going to sack and then occupy and try to fight off these Catholic armies. I'm going to do some global recruiting over the turn. And lucky for me, the Catholic armies didn't come straight at me. They kind of separated, but there's an Avalon army here now as well. So we're just going to get out of here. We don't need these fights. We've robbed the Elves of Gain Vale. Now let's go and try to rob the Elves of Lothorn again. So I sail my way back over, but there's still a lot of armies around. Elves seems to have a lot of presence. But when we arrive to Lothorn, there's no army stationed there, so I can't resist. I gotta do it. The garrison has a few strong units, but mostly cheap archers. So let's rob some more elves. I had scrammed a knife fierce stabber, put some holes in the wall so my boars could just charge in. I used some of my siege deployment tricks to make the enemy be over the other side of the settlement so we could just pour in freely over here, which was pretty much hiding most of my army in the trees except for our glamorous assistant, the nasty elf cracker, who showed herself over here, and then the entire enemy army came over this side. So that's how we got in easy. From there, it was the boars just tearing through the place, sending these elves absolutely fucking flying. There's nothing quite as enjoyable as watching an elf fly 50 feet and then smashing into a stone pavement. So the boars mostly ran things through, but some infantry came in there to help as well, and it wasn't long before we had the place utterly conquered. And how much was our trouble going to yield? 5 grand from the fight and 74 from the sack. 80 grand, not bad for a day's work. From here, we got the hell out of there. There was a lot of armies starting to form up on this region, so we needed to relocate. I'd sailed back around to Tor and Rock where we started, but they managed to get a stack there before we could get into it, so we decided just to keep moving. We were still getting about 3 grand from raiding, and I just pushed around taking out the smaller settlements and getting what we could from those. We did have to be a little bit careful for a while because we didn't have our war anymore, so we're just 2 stacks now. So I moved carefully through the land, trying to use ambushes where I could, managed to get an Attain army here, but although we were getting the wins and wearing down enemy armies, it was wearing down us as well. We did get in a little bit of a rough spot with 2 Avalon armies coming at us, but it was nothing the boys couldn't handle. One of their armies was pretty basic, just spearmen and archers, so we could run that through with all our cav. Very messy battle, but we got the job done. However, we were losing units now. I lost a fair few units of cav in that one, so I was going to need to replenish and re-recruit some stuff, which we didn't really have time to do, so I just had to recruit the fastest thing I could, which was river trolls for Grimgor. But then it was wartime once again, and we were going to go for Ivres, probably the last big major city on the continent we hadn't sacked yet. So we made our way round there. There was no big armies in our way. Only Eltharian's army was behind us. You could basically hear him going, "Oh fuck, they're going for Torres," as he desperately tries to scramble back there before we get there, but obviously he's not going to do it, so Torres is pretty much ours for the taking. And what do we make for our efforts here? Robbing these elves, nearly 6 grand from the fight and 58 from the sack. A pretty tasty payday, although honestly I was expecting more. I thought it was going to be more like 70, 80 like the others, but alright, fine. Ivres is a little bit poor right now. It's fine. That brings us up to 800k in the bank though, only 200 to go. I kept pushing around this way to see what else I could get. They had another big city, but it had a big stack there. There was some stacks behind us. This was a little bit of a dodgy position. I tried my luck with an ambush though, which obviously didn't work, and they came after us with 3 stacks. I managed to get the retreat very luckily. So then I thought, well, fuck it, let's just go back the other way and we'll hit all the other settlements down this coast. But Eltharian and his gang weren't too happy with me. They came after me. I tried to block their armies to slow them down. This bought us a little time to sack another place on the way, Tor Aker. That was another 50 Gs in the bank, so we were nearly at 900,000 now. We also sacked another nearby little town, but then Eltharian caught up with us, again bringing his triple stack bros, and I once again tried for the retreat and managed to get over the river, or so I thought. Grimgor had managed to get over the river and was able to drop a quick sack, pushing us into that 900k, just 100,000 to go. But it seemed our luck had run out because my other boy, Asgog Elfburner, didn't actually get over the river, so he's stuck with those 3 elf armies, which means Grimgor has got to come back and help him. We're going to ambush, we're going to try our luck, and good lord was Gork and Mork smiling on us as we did manage to get an ambush, so that took care of one of the armies. But then of course that silly bitch Alariel got involved, bringing one of her Avalon armies with their 2 remaining Ivres armies, and now we had a real fight on our hands. I pretty much had 2 stacks versus their 3. This might be the end of the campaign. We can't retreat. I guess we're going in hard. So this battle, being near a river, was a choke point battle, and it was only a single choke point. We took up our defensive position first while the enemy waited for all their reinforcements, which just so happened to be about 19 units of sparkly fucking pigeons, who tend to be pretty difficult to kill. So this was going to be an absolute grind fest, no doubt. This was going on. I have no idea what exactly I'm looking at, but it went on. So this battle just plowed on. There wasn't much to do in the way of matchups and stuff. You do what you can, but it's such a mess. I did, though, drop a very nice purple sun, which absolutely decimated a large chunk of their army that very kindly ran straight into the spell. So that did a lot of solid work on a bunch of the units that were incoming. You can see the favor bar is really not in our favor. But by the end of that purple sun, Danasty Elf Cracker had 4 grand in damage value done. So safe to say that made a difference. And given the success of that purple sun, I figured, hey, there's a few more good opportunities for a few more purple suns here. So I dropped them on blobs with varying amounts of success. Both sides were getting incredibly worn down. I was trying to get around the back to get after their missiles and artillery that they've got back here, but it was a struggle. And at this point, it's looking pretty bleak. There's a lot of blue and elven green flags. The favor bar is 75% theirs, but they hadn't anticipated our river trolls, so in came the river trolls finally. I really needed them to try and make an impact. I charged a bunch straight forward just into the blob of elves that were there, and then had a couple of units flank round the back to try and envelop them and break their leadership more than anything. Everyone is low on leadership. Everyone's health is absolutely fucked at this point. But we start getting there. We start winning back some of that favor bar. I've got Grimgor and the big boss trying to take care of the sparkly birds. And we do manage to get there eventually, routing off the enemy army, spirit leeching Alariel to death. Down she goes. So we've just managed to survive this elf assault, and it's in large part to this sexy lady, Danasty Elf Cracker. She came away with 10 grand's worth of gold value damage. So pretty much taking out an army or two by herself. But this was the most Pyrrhic of Pyrrhic victories, as our armies are now absolutely destroyed, as are theirs. We made 27 grand off the battle itself. But the fun isn't over yet, as while we may have survived those 3 armies, there's another one right there to try and get us. A fresh Ivres stack. We are definitely screwed if we try to take this on, so we got to retreat, and thankfully we then get over the river. Asgog is safe. Jesus Christ. At this point, our only escape was to head to the water and try to get some distance between all these armies, so we headed over to the Shrine of Cain area, and I tried to get in as much recruitment and replenishment as I could. I had a lot of one-turn globals, so we had some good options, but we found no peace, of course, because that Ivres army was still on our ass. I fought this battle mostly using my more healthy units so that I didn't risk losing any units. So I managed to beat them back, only losing a couple of chariots. And then we finally had a little room to replenish and recruit, and from there we could sack the Shrine of Cain as it was there. That put a little more in the bank, bringing us up to 950k. So close! I decided to pour some of that money into my armies, though, getting some big regiments of renown to try and finish the job here. And it wasn't long before a couple more elf armies were on top of us, but we were ready to take them on, plow through them, and get to that final big settlement maybe to finish the job. So we went after the Avalon army in front of us, but they pegged it away. I decided to keep pushing forward towards that settlement right there, Tor and Lek. That could be the final one we need. So we rolled up on it. The army that was stationed there ran away. It was ours for the taking. 5 grand from the fight, 44 from the sack. But we were still about 13 grand short because I spent that money on the raw units. But the little old settlement of Tor Dranil was just there for the taking. Grimgor rolled up on it. 2 grand from the fight, 14 grand from the sack. There it was. 1 mil. Grimgor was now a millionaire. He'd done it. If he had a dad, he would have been proud. Before we left Ulthuan, there was just one more task to do. Stand out in the open and let some elves come at us so we could kill some fucking elves. So one last time we had a rumble with some elves charging straight at them. The boys were ready for a final bit of elf clobbering, and Grimgor with his one-track mind was after one thing. Elf head. Wait, hold on. What I mean is, there's a stupid elf and a stupid hat, so Grimgor's got to push her in the bush. Just like I know you did to the nerds at school. And then Grimgor walks also into the bush like a bit of a sex offender. I guess he really was after that elf head. Let's look away. But oh, luckily for her, she's saved by a dragon. She manages to avoid Grimgor's decapitation, but she does not manage to avoid endless comedy pig knockdowns. That is her fate for eternity. The boys had a whale of a time in this battle, though, chopping down elves like there's no tomorrow. The big un got some revenge, although he's mostly slapping orcs in the face here, the idiot. But Grimgor could not believe his luck, as he'd found another stupid elf in a stupid hat. This was his chance to get that decapitation. She tried to drown herself, but it didn't work. So Grimgor chopped her head off. No pun intended. No, really, no puns intended this time. Just He chopped her head off. She's dead. Elves are dead. All hell, Grimgor. Yes! So there we go, another 2,000 elves dead. I really should have kept count, actually, throughout this campaign, but there we go. Grimgor's off back home to buy himself a Lambo and a mansion. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. I do have a playlist of this. If you're interested, do consider supporting the channel through YouTube membership or Patreon. I do have some early access stuff, some member videos, blah, blah, blah. Otherwise, I will see you in the future.